Welcome, AP Calculus students, to the third and final part of this series of videos on how to find an integral using a calculator. In part one, I talked about how to find an integral using the TI Inspire calculators. In part two, I talked to you guys how to find an integral using the Ti-83 plus or 84 plus. And in part three, we're going to be looking at the Ti-83 and 84 plus calculators again. But this time we're going to be looking at the older versions of their operating system, the older versions of the operating systems, which handle finding integrals a little bit different. A lot of the button presses are the same, but you'll notice in part two there is a certain point at which basically the two calculators branch off into two directions, and that's what we're going to be covering today. Now, I'm not going to be covering the first part of finding the graph, finding the intersection, because it's basically the same as the newer versions of the 83 and the 84 plus. So if you do want to figure out how to do the first part of that, just go to part two of the video and you can watch basically the first half of that video to take care of that. I'm going to be going straight to the integral part of the question that we're going to be looking at, because that's the only part that's going to be different. So once again, we're looking at the 2019 AP Calculus AB exam. More specifically, we're looking at that second free response question, which is a calculator section. We're going to be looking at that section. And even more specifically, we're going to be looking at part C. Okay, so this is a question that we've done. So once again, we're looking at part C of that question. So once again, we're going to jump straight into, we found those t values where b sub q is greater than or equal to 60, and then we're going to find the total distance traveled of that particle using the integral. So once again, we're going to take the integral. All right, so let me just make sure this is in radians mode. It is not. Once again, as I said in part two, make sure your calculator is in radians mode. So press mode, scroll down, make sure radians is highlighted, press enter, and boom, you're good. All right, I'll get out of here, second mode to quit. Okay, now once again, for the most part, it's the same. So we're still going to press this math button just like we did before. We're still going to press this math button, and it's still going to be the ninth option. So if you want to scroll down, it's still the ninth option. It's still this FNINT function that we're going to be using. So we're going to press enter again. And this is where you can see things are a little bit different. This time, instead of it showing us an integral symbol, instead of us showing an integral symbol, it literally just shows us FNINT. It's going to show us FNINT. Now you'll see it's still going to evaluate the integral for us. We just have to know how to use this function. So the first thing you want to do, the first thing you want to type in is you want to type in that expression this time. So you don't want to type in the bottom interval value or the top interval value this time. No, this time you want to type in the expression value, so the absolute value of v sub q. So let's do that. So if you recall, to get the absolute value, press math. And then you want to press right, and you have that ABS option. And once again, we're going to press enter. And this time it looks different again. Instead of giving us those absolute value bars, it literally says ABS, which stands for absolute value. So let's type in that equation. So 45, at this point, this is just the same, square root. We can do in terms of t again, so alpha 4. This time we do have to close that square root, though. We do have to close that square root. And then cosine of 0.063 alpha 4 squared, close parentheses. Now, you'll see we have to close parentheses again. You'll see on these older models, you have to be a lot more careful with parentheses, because if you don't close them, then the calculator isn't going to do it automatically for you. Now we're going to put another parentheses to close the absolute value. So this parentheses was to close the cosine one. This parentheses is to close the absolute value parentheses. So that's the first thing you want to do. You want to type out that equation, write out that equation. Now we're going to do a comma. Now the second thing you want to type in is, now, once again, we're going in a completely different order, is the variable we're integrating with respect to. So since we left our equation with respect to t, we are integrating with respect to t. So comma t. Make sure you put that comma there. Now we're going to put another comma, and now we're going to put the bottom limit of our interval. the bottom limit of our interval, which was 1.866. So 1.866, comma, again, top limit of our interval. Top limit of our interval, which was 3.519. Now we can close the parentheses again. You don't really have to at this point. At this point, we can close the parentheses to represent that first parentheses that we had. Now you want to press enter. And we get our answer 106.109. So once again, on these older operating versions or operating system versions of the 83 plus, 84 plus, it's a little bit more complicated to find an integral. Still not too bad, but it is a little bit more difficult than the newer versions of the 83 plus, 84 plus, and then obviously the TI Inspires, where they just show you the integral, and then it's pretty self-explanatory from there. So once again, it's still math, and it's still option 9, okay? You just got to make sure you put it in the correct order. So once again, the first thing that you put in is your equation. So in this case, it was the absolute value of v sub q, comma, variable that you're integrating with respect to, comma, the bottom limit of your interval value, 1.866, comma, the top limit of your interval value, 3.519. And then close that parentheses, boom, you're done. Once again, for this one, you did have to be a little bit more careful, because since we used that absolute value, which created a parentheses, we had to close that parentheses. Let me show you what would have happened really quickly. Let me just delete this. Come on. Oh, I gotta scroll. There you go. Let me show you what would have happened had we not put that parentheses to close the absolute value. Had you not put that parentheses to close the absolute value, so I'm just going to delete that parentheses there, the calculator would have given you an argument error. And then if you said go to, it would have told you that this parentheses, since it's highlighting the parentheses, means there's either a parentheses missing, there's too many parentheses. In this case, it would be a parentheses missing. So really quickly, let me show you how you would, let's say you missed that parentheses. Besides typing in the whole thing again, what you can do is you go back to where you want to type it in, which is right there. You want to press second delete, because you want to insert a parentheses. Now you'll see it flashes as opposed to just staying solid. And insert that parentheses, boom. Now we can press enter, get the appropriate answer that we wanted, okay? So once again, and I did this on a Ti-83 plus, but it would be the exact same way on the older operating system versions of the Ti-84 plus as well. So once again, this video is for if you have an older operating system version of either the Ti-83 plus or the 84 plus. If you don't, if this is not what your screen looks like, if you do FNINT, so if you go to math 9th option, then you should be watching part 2. And once again, I skipped the graphing part I skipped the graphing part for this question because I covered that in part 2, and it's exactly the same whether you have the newer version of the 83 plus, 84 plus, or the older version. Okay, so that is the third and final video concluding how you find an integral using any of the graphing calculator models that you guys might have. Hopefully I covered everything from what I know about the calculators that you guys have. None of you have a version different from this. You guys might have, some of you might have the 84 plus, but the color version. There is a color version for the 84 plus where it's not just black and white like this. You might have that version. That will still work exactly the same as the part 2 video, so don't worry about that. All right. Now, the next series of calculator videos that I plan to do is how you find a derivative now. We talked about how to find an integral, and do a series of videos on how to evaluate a derivative as well. Otherwise, I hope you guys find these series of videos helpful. Hope you guys are staying healthy. Hope you guys are staying safe. And otherwise, I wish that you guys enjoy the rest of your days. See you later.